your hits on your blessed best FM. Isaac 98.1 FM.
Put me arms are doing it for 100. Time to praise the Lord, we say we're praising him for 100. Working in the ministry, we're working it for 100. Working it for 100. Working it for 100.
Isaac 98.1 FM. Playing real music variety.
We rise up like the sun, and any and everything we overcome. We on the victory rock, yeah.
Listening anywhere and everywhere on your #1 family station, Isaac 98.1 FM.
Be part of the Citizens Community Forum, a place where we bring to light and discuss critical community, social, and national issues.
The volcano, even when it subsides, would leave us, my dear brother Stephen, a prospect of mud flows, and we have had some already.
Prime Minister Gonzalez, the aid that is coming in, is it getting to the people who are in need? That has always been a question.
I would say overwhelmingly so. You will have hiccups, some cases that some persons, for one reason or the other, haven't received. But I would say overwhelmingly, we must integrate what we do at home with our regional institutions and our global partners.
We have to understand, and we accept as a business community, we accept, look, yes, there has to be the restriction. But the point is, we are saying, don't just give restrictions. Along with restrictions, let's have vaccinations.
Discussions on health, leadership, governance, crime, education, and social justice every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m. The Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Cummings and welcome again to the Citizens Community Forum. Our objective is always to have an engaging, interactive civil discourse, and it's doing...
It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.
Tobago, I suppose like many other countries in the world, is yet to find its way out of the clutches of a deadly virus. And while several countries have found different ways to respond,
it was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.
Impact on the most vulnerable are all indicators that countries must have a crisis response plan and a clearly defined trajectory for post-pandemic recovery. Well, this evening, inside the Citizens Community Forum, our topic, Road Ahead for SMEs, current and post-pandemic. And to help discuss the issue, joining me for the next hour is Mr. Martin George, Chair of the Tobago Business Chamber, and we expect to join us a little later on, Mr. Jai Lalodasing, a business consultant and coordinator of the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers. Mr. George, first of all, good evening and welcome again to the Citizens Community Forum.
Yes, good evening to you, Stephen, and good evening to your listeners and to your viewers who may be streaming it live on Facebook.
And thank you so much again, Sir George, for joining us. Well, we are looking at a couple of things this evening, Mr. George, and I know that, you would have a lot to say on that announcement of the reopening of that's a very, very critical and important sector. I think, a lot of people are looking forward to, come on the 16th, is it? We do expect, a sort of, that next level phased, sort of reopening of the economy. But before we get into those, to that, those particular areas, Mr. George, your assessment of our response to the pandemic so far. We have had 15 months of an economic, lockdown, and I know that you have also been talking about the need for vaccination, but we'll treat with that a little later on. But first of all, as we begin the program, your assessment of our response so far, 15 months on.
Well, Stephen, one has to be fair and one has to look at it from a global perspective. And all in all, I will say Trinidad and Tobago has not done badly at all. Okay, we're a small nation, and this pandemic is really a moving target. It's a rolling goalpost. So the thing is, you always have to keep reassessing, readjusting, and maybe tweaking your plans, tweaking your programs, tweaking your objectives, so that way you try to always keep your eye on the ball, so to speak. So I think, all in all, while there have been, some glaring missteps, some failures, and, some cases where they literally dropped the ball, like, for instance, in the procurement of vaccines, I think definitely that was our biggest error, that we didn't jump out there early and make sure that we were, first in line, so to speak, to get vaccines. And then, of course, I think there were some errors in terms of the PR and the communication aspect where, you saw, government officials getting into spats with diplomatic, missions, and, that kind of thing was just an unnecessary distraction, which I don't think we needed at all. But, now that we have the vaccines, of course, the challenge is to ensure that we sensitize the population to make them aware of the benefits of it. And I think there, again, the government needs to do more. They definitely need to step up the game in terms of the advertising, PR, marketing campaign to get people voluntarily to want to take the vaccine. Because, that's always your first step. And,
Yes.
Stephen, the way I am, I'm always very reasonable. So I always prefer that, you try to go with the coercion, the gentle persuasion, rather than the big stick approach. If, however, you find that nothing else is working, then of course, it's like, growing up, your parents would sometimes say, if you can't hear, you will feel, so to speak, So that sometimes might be, your recourse of last resort.
And, we talk also about this issue of hesitancy, and I see that word coming up, ever so often when we talk vaccination. When we look at Tobago and, the population, which is much smaller than Trinidad, what do you get as a sense of, when we talk about vaccine hesitancy? Is it that people are more willing to be vaccinated, or do you find that there is still a sense of people not wanting to rush or be pushed, as it were, into being vaccinated?
I think the vaccine hesitancy is alive and kicking in Tobago, because we've had from the chief secretary, he's indicated that at one point there were only 53% of healthcare workers who had received the vaccine, despite them making it available to all of them. So if that has been your response in terms of the voluntary aspect of it, and these are the persons who are at the front line, they are facing the danger every day, and they still are resistant, right? You've heard also, they spoke about the teachers, those in the education sector, some of whom they said have not come forth to be vaccinated. And then you hear the government speaking about reopening schools in September.
Yes.
So how is that going to work out? If it is that you have teachers who are not taking the vaccine, then what do you leave for the students? What do you leave for the parents of those students who may say, look, I mean, if I as a parent, I'm not taking it, I'm not going to let them give my child any vaccine. So, you know, it creates, I think, a conundrum out of which we may find no avenue except to think of maybe some resort to a legislative solution. But as you say, we'll discuss that at a later point in the program.
Yes, but one understands as well, Mr. George, that if we have to talk about the revitalization of business and the very lifeline of especially SMEs, which, as you know, contribute to a large, a large sector of, of any economy, we would have to, we'd have to be talking vaccination and people, especially for Trinidad and Tobago, so that we can find our way out of what, I would term this, economic black hole.
Yeah, and Stephen, what makes it even more important is the fact that when you think in the scenario of the small business where customers are coming in, they're interacting with the staff, they're interacting with other customers there. I mean, once you open back up the retail sector, if you are talking large numbers of unvaccinated persons, then you are going to see spikes. And the very thing that the workers and the customers want for business to be reopened, you may very well see the government having to come back out and say, listen, we have to lock down again. And nobody wants that, because the thing is, there's no business that can survive this boom bust cycle all the time.
Yes.
You need some kind of consistency, you need some kind of planning, you need some kind of stability in terms of your business operations.
Yes.
So we certainly don't want to see that.
Mr. George, the Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, was talking about the amount of money that developed countries have actually poured into, in response to COVID-19. And dealing with the pandemic. I wanted to just get a listen to what the Prime Minister said. He spoke about countries having to spend some 20% of their GDP. Let's just listen to the Prime Minister and I'll have you respond.
The one that struck me was that developed countries have spent 20% of their GDP in responding to COVID. Now that is a frightening number. So we here in Trinidad and Tobago will have to do the same exercise. We're doing it now, and we will eventually tell you what we come up with for our economy. And I was hoping that by now we would have had, one of our universities would have had somebody who would have done that. But we do get more echoes than substance. But I would really like to see the work done to determine how much. But the report coming out of developing countries, that some countries have spent up to 20% of their GDP just in responding to COVID. So you could imagine carrying the rest of the country, and you add a 20% of the GDP because of COVID, what that would have done to your budgetary planning.
Mr. George, I think the Prime Minister is also hinting of what is to come, because we do have a budget, that's going to come very shortly. But let me have you respond to that before we develop that, that point further.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Stephen, one can never, predict for any, unforeseen events such as this. So therefore, that's why we have, for instance, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, right, which was supposed to be our backup for a rainy day. Well, I mean, this is more than a rainy day. This is a deluge.
Yes.
Yes, it's a deluge, So the point is, I think it's also by way of explanation for maybe the government's use of that fund. And I think also to tell citizens to brace themselves for even more economic, challenges, that's the nicest way I can put it, going forward. Now, this does not absolve or exonerate any government from not having a plan otherwise for the economic recovery. So in other words, okay, yes, we're down in a black hole and we may have to, dip into our reserves in order to try and keep the ship afloat. But beyond that, and that's what I am not hearing from this government at all. I am not hearing, in other words, what is the long-term plan to get us back to a position of economic prosperity, because you've heard them, they formed committees. They had the roadmap to recovery committee where everybody, I guess, maybe sat around, they clinked champagne glasses, and they probably had lobster and caviar, and they wrote a nice report, and that then seemed to have gone somewhere in somebody's cupboard or in a box under a desk somewhere, because you hear nothing about that anymore. And you wonder, okay, so where are we going in terms of the short, medium, long-term planning for this country? And that's where the government is, abysmally silent. Because, of course, yes, you fight the fire that is immediately upon you. You deal with that. And, of course, they've been engaged in that. But you, as the leaders, you must have that foresight and vision to start that strategic planning for the future. And that's where I think they have been, woefully short in terms of communicating any plans to the nation in respect of that.
Mr. George, what I'm also hearing you saying is that while we need to have a roadmap for economic recovery, we also need to have a roadmap for recovery of the business sector.
That's correct. That's correct. And you see, that's the point, because the thing is, the reality is, Stephen, there are many businesses which will not survive this pandemic. That's a fact. Now, of course, businesses go in cycles and economies go in cycles. So we understand that. That's part of life. That's part of how, the whole economic circle goes. But the point is that you, as the government, you, from that macro perspective, and, it's a bit surprising, that's the nicest way I can put it, to hear the Prime Minister, basically calling for maybe some assistance from somebody from the university to
he's calling for studies, statistics, data
plans. And I'm thinking, but you have an entire central bank with so many economists, you have so many financial planners, strategists, you have actuaries, you have all kinds of persons there at the central bank, and this is what they should be doing. So I don't understand the call for some random person from a university who would not have the data, the resources, the wherewithal, or the means that the central bank is possessed of to be, giving you the kind of information that you need to now put an economic plan in place. That's what your central bank is for, because the central bank is supposed to help you start to stabilize and manage your economy in a way that you can now say, okay, all right, so these are the resources I have going forward. This is where I have a shortfall. This is where I need to improve. And therefore, now you come up with a plan. And that's how I thought it would be done. So it again belies the fact of what I just mentioned, that there appears to be no plan that the government has for our medium to long-term economic recovery.
All right, and I will allow you to develop that point a little further on, a little later on in the program. Let me welcome Mr. Jai Ladadar Singh joining us inside the Citizens Community Forum. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Stephen. My apologies for being late, but I'm happy to join you all. Thank you very much. Martin, good night.
Jai. It's a pleasure.
Right.
It's a pleasure.
A pleasure, Martin.
Yes.
Yes, Jai, you had us concern for a while there, whether or not you were able to join us, but thank you all the same. We were discussing this business of SMEs, Jai, and we wanted to get a perspective as to where we are, where we should be going, and of course having a plan, a recovery plan. Let me just bring you in here as you've just joined us. Where do you see us in terms of, we're talking about the SMEs, where are we now, Jai, from your perspective, and where do you think we need to be going, knowing that, we've had some 15 months of an economic lockdown, and the small and, medium-sized enterprise sector has been out of commission, for the last, 5-6 months. Where are we now? Your assessment?
We are in a very dark place. As Mr. Sir Vidya Naipaul wrote in a title of his book, we are in an area of darkness. Now, I want to begin by stating that I do agree with Martin, that you have the central bank collecting all this data. And how are you converting this data into value? And he's put it succinctly, into a plan. That's one important aspect of the central bank. But more importantly, Stephen, is that the government need to bring the chambers into a discussion, a round table, Martin, with all the key stakeholders to give their points at this round table, what is happening, why it is happening, and what we need to do. What are the steps for the future? Now, basically, Steve, man, I'm getting into the SMEs. What is happening is that we are all managing uncertainty. The playbook to manage this pandemic has not been written. We are writing it as we go along, right, Martin?
Yes,
and that is what is happening. But to write it is not just up to one stakeholder alone, which is the government. It is all other stakeholders. It is the institutions. It is the business class. Yes, we have a role to play, the central bank, and we need to come together to do a plan for recovery. Now, the SMEs. I want to start off by giving some statistics to your listening audience. According to the Ministry of Legal Affairs, there are 28,000 registered businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, Stephen, bear in mind, this is the formal sector.
Right.
There is another sector called the informal
sector. Yes.
Not much studies has been done, but there is someone by the name of Dr. Sandra Supram of UE who has done extensive research. Government and private sector need to get their hands on her research, meaning to bring her in in the discussion to find out exactly what is the state of the informal sector. And that's one. Out of that 28,000 registered businesses, 17,000 belong to the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. That is absolutely important to note. We at the Confederation did a quick and dirty survey among our 16 different business associations. And in that 16 different, the raw data coming in, it appears that 5,000 businesses approximately will be permanently closed. And more are going to be closed as time goes by. This is happening simply because, and you gave an accurate timeline of the lockdowns. Some of these businesses, Mr. Cummings, need weekly and monthly sales to survive, to pay employees, to keep operating. It didn't happen. And Martin, my understanding is much harder in Tobago right now. And all the hotels are closed.
Yes. And you're dealing with a very small resident population.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Based population. Yes.
Yeah. Right. And Stephen, the SME sector in Chaguanas, Hoover, Gasparillo, Marabella, Pinal Davis, it's a community based as well. Point 14. I mean, that community needs a lot of help. Pfizer bad. They need a lot of help as well. But the thing is that their operations were curtailed. This country, Stephen, cannot take a third lockdown. We cannot.
But
Jai, that is what I'm afraid of. That is what I'm really afraid of, because the thing is, if we don't manage the reopening properly, and you see, I'm particularly concerned when you talk about schools being fully reopened by October.
Yes.
That is of concern to me, because to me, that is the greatest super spreader event. You're talking hundreds of thousands of citizens coming out every day, Monday to Friday. Then you think of all the transport that is required, all the taxis, the maxi, the drivers, the conductors, then the parents who have to drop children back and forth, the interactions with people in the PTA, the suppliers to the schools, the teachers, I mean, it is going to be a nightmare if we are not properly vaccinated.
There is an interlink, because once you talk about school children, you're talking about transportation, you're talking about, so many other linkages.
So many other ancillary things, that's correct. Just the people who run in the cafeterias in the schools, who serving food, drinks, whatever for the children, those who doing the school feeding, the nutritionists. So I mean, it is wow. I am most worried about that if we are not properly vaccinated. And then the other thing, Jai, is if it is that you have parents who are vaccine hesitant or vaccine resistant, then that means for sure they are not going to let you vaccinate their children. They will resist.
That is also true. I just want to touch back on the SME sector, and then we'll dive into the whole issue of the schools and the public servants and the teachers and so on. So the thing is that, Stephen, and to your listening audience, a lot of these businesses are going to remain closed. What is going to happen to these people who are unemployed? What is the social dislocation and that is taking place? Now, another thing I want to say, Stephen, is that yes, we could help these closed businesses reopen, but they're not going to get help from the banks because the banks solely depend on debt financing, and an SME could only take so much of debt. They can't go beyond a certain level.
Yes.
And the resilience is exceedingly limited owing to the SME size. It's not a Nilan Masi or Ansa Makal you're talking about. These are very small businesses that employ 3 to 5 people running by a husband and wife. It's actually tough.
Moms and pops, yes.
Moms and pops is actually tough. And I mean, this business is a legacy that they want to leave for their progeny. And that is what makes it hard. Now, let's talk about vaccination in the workplace, and then we'll take a nosedive into what Martin described about in the schools. Now, I mean, these business owners have children going to schools to Martin as well.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing about it is that they know, that these business owners know that they have to vaccinate to operate. I'm just stating what the government has said. And they want to encourage, I'm choosing my words carefully, Stephen, their employees to be vaccinated. I heard you responding, Martin.
That's another discussion, huh? I know where you're going, and that's another discussion, but we don't want to be derailed, from the central points, here.
Understood. Yeah. So the thing about it is that, so you have children going to school. Now, a policy has to be set by the government, some kind of direction. If children are going to school, this is what is required. Now, Martin, in another program this morning, was talking about when we were all school children. I mean, we are aged now, Martin, speaking only for me. But we got our typhoid injection, poliomyelitis, yellow fever, all the things, malaria, right?
That's right.
Right? Now, I know AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, the Sinopharm, and Johnson & Johnson are what you call emergency use administration.
Yes.
It's not a fully approved vaccine, but right now it's the only defense that we have.
Thank you.
And that's the point that's being made, yes.
Thank you.
All right. That is the only defense that we have.
Yeah. Let me.
So, Stephen, sorry, Jai, let me just make this point. It's almost as if, you're in a situation where a plane is about to crash and they're handing out parachutes, and you are arguing as to who made the parachute and whether the parachute is good or whether the factory is good or what quality. At the end of the day, wouldn't you prefer to jump out with the parachute than with no parachute? And that's the simple truth.
Yes.
That's the simplest way you could put it.
All right,
that's right.
Yeah, Mr. George, I want to stay with you for a little while, and I'll have Mr. Lalda Singh also respond to this. And he made a very important point a while ago when he was talking about the survival of businesses. Now, I heard the finance minister, the Honorable Colin Ember, talking about having found that there are a lot of businesses that did not have for example, their financials. They were very weak in terms of record keeping, he came across as though that there was an indictment on even SMEs, and because a lot of people, he said, came for loans. The government offered, there's a loan facility, and a lot of them were not able to access because of some basic things that they were not able to provide, and to provide the banks and so on. How do you respond to such a statement, Mr. George? And I'll have Mr. Lalda Singh respond as well.
No, well, the reality is, and this has been our experience with a lot of the small and medium enterprises in Tobago, it was exposed starkly in terms of who was ready and prepared to be able to provide all the statutory documents and show that you are up to date with all your requirements, and who wasn't. I could tell you that as a fact, Stephen. And it's mainly the larger, more organized businesses and corporations that were ready and they had everything together, and the small operators had to start scrambling around. Many of them actually could not meet the requirements because you're talking about years of statutory obligations that they had not met. So the thing about it is that we used the opportunity to reach out to our members to say, listen, hey, use this as a lesson. Stephen, I always like to look at life in a holistic context. So you met a stumbling block here. So next time, make sure you use it as a stepping stone. Won't let it be a stumbling block a second time around. So therefore, get your business in order. Make sure that your NIS, your VAT, your taxes, whatever, make sure all these things are up to date, everything is paid up, because at the end of the day, Stephen, that is part of the responsibility, which helps to build the foundation for a successful and lasting business. Because if you operate in a reckless vai manner where you think that, well, look, I don't have to bother with this, I don't have to bother with that, then that creeps in to all aspects of your business operations, and soon you will just be running helter-skelter with no plan, no proper direction, no, annual review where you can say, well, look, hey, this is what we made for the year, this is our profit, this is what we're going to put aside as investment, then, okay, whatever is left, if any, then you could look at that as dividends to be, shared up, or, it requires a certain amount of discipline. Right. One of the things I always tell, young attorneys, and I tell them, like when they want to go out, like in private practice to be a sole practitioner, I said, listen, you need to understand the most difficult part of the job is learning to manage yourself. Self-management. As a sole trader, a sole practitioner, a sole businessman, a small, operator, managing yourself is the most difficult. So in other words, you have to be able to put self-discipline. Yes. Discipline. Thank you. And then everything else will flow from that, because your workers will realize, hey, listen, this man is serious. He's not playing. It's this way, and this is the correct way, and we are doing it this way, or you have to, is the highway, basically. And that kind of discipline is necessary. So I spoke to many of our members, and, I told them, I said, listen, okay, all right, no sense crying over spilt milk. Put your things in gear, use this opportunity to get yourself in shape so that if ever an opportunity like this comes back around, and then even, for instance, if you want to go to a financial institution for a loan or whatever, they will ask for some of these same documents. All right. So you might as well get them ready and get them in order. But on the last point I want to make, Stephen, rather than lecturing and hectoring, the small businessman on these issues, I would have been happier to hear from the finance minister, him saying, well, listen, we recognize there was an issue and we are providing a solution. We are going to go through the small business development company and offer more courses, more programs, more assistance for small and medium enterprises, so to help them to get regularized, get organized, get their statutory things in place, show them the importance of, for instance, preparing a proper business plan, show them the importance of having proper accounts, even if it's just a small, you don't even need to hire an accountant. You could just use an accounting technician to start off if you're small, or you could keep your own little ledger books. They could teach you how, and this is how you lead as a government. So it's not just that you come down and you criticize and say, oh, well, they weren't ready. That's easy to do. When you are a man and you are leading as a leader should, you want to empower your people so that they can grow. It's not just to put them down and criticize them and say, well, they weren't ready for what you had for them. So, I would have preferred, respectfully, to see a different approach from the minister in that regard.
All right, so George, we'll come back to you shortly. Jai, we have just about 2 minutes before we go to the break, and I want to have you respond to that very same point. As I said, it sounded almost like an indictment on the SMEs, that these operators did not have their business in order, and the government is saying that while we are willing to help, and while the financial sector is willing to help, the banks, and so many businesses were not ready.
All right, Stephen, I may need a little time after the break to continue to build a point. I can't do it in 2 minutes, but let me start off by saying, all right. Now, I agree with Martin that they have to put their statutory requirements in order. But understand something. What is the function of the compliant departments of BIR and NIB and so forth as well? Are they actually doing their job and going to businesses to ensure a certain level of compliance have taken place? That's the first issue. The second issue is that we are going through a COVID crisis. Businesses on the verge of collapsing, and you are pulling out measures to penalize people simply because over the years you have allowed them not to put certain things in place. Now, these SMEs, they go to the banks with accounts. They may not even be audited accounts, but they still get facilities. They still get overdrafts.
We'll have you develop that point further. And you're listening to and viewing the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. Our topic this evening, road ahead for SMEs, the current and post-pandemic. And I have with me Mr. Jai Ladodar Singh, business consultant and coordinator of the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers. We have also Mr. Martin George, chair of the Tobago Business Chamber. And we are going to come back after the short break. We'll be right back.
Every Wednesday, join our 1-hour current affairs program, the Citizens Community Forum. Topics are wide-ranging and echoes opinions and voices of our society. Whether it be leadership, governance, health, crime, politics, or social issues, we can all have a civil and constructive discussion inside the Citizens Community Forum every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. on Isaac 98.1 FM with Stephen Cummings.
Last week when I heard that there were 16 children sleeping in the cell in a police station, that was something that was unacceptable to me.
The current constitution of the Public Services Association, there have been concerns about how the constitution...
If you are restructuring the PSA, the only way you can restructure the PSA is through constitutional reform.
If the minister does not accede our request and revalidate his license, we'll have to be heading to court.
Every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m., the Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings.
Prime Minister, good evening to you and welcome to the Citizens Community Forum.
Good evening, my brother, and all your viewers, listeners. I'm happy to be here with you.
You know, our complaints have been more solid, and it's been more substance coming forward now. Mr. Cummings, I think Trinidad can be proud of their civilian oversight.
Mr. Cummings, you are asking about our operational, you are asking about it from an operational standpoint. And I think where we stand out and where we stand apart from other investigative bodies is that we rely mostly on science.
But first of all, good evening, Stephen. Thank you very much for having me on your program, and a very good evening to all of your listeners. It's good to be with you once again.
And welcome back to the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and we are continuing our discussion this evening. I have with me Mr. Martin George, Chair of the Tobago Business Chamber, as well as Mr. Jai Ladodar Singh, and we are discussing the business of the SMEs, looking at where we are as a business sector. We are looking at you might want to say a roadmap for the continuance and the development of the business sector in Trinidad and Tobago. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes. Jai, you were making a point before we went to the break, and I'll just allow you to finish that off, and I'll go back to Mr. George.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. First of all, my designation is that I am the coordinator of the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers. That is 15 different business bodies under one umbrella. While each chamber is autonomous, we speak with one voice. And these are the chambers that are outside Port of Spain. San Juan, Tanapuna, Sangre Grande, which is under the name of the Eastern Business Merchants Association. We have the Gasparilla Marabella Chamber of Commerce, Greater San Fernando Chamber, Pinal-de-Bay, Siparia, Faizabad, Point Fortin. We have the Yachting Marine Services of Trinidad and Tobago. We have the Petroleum Dealers Association, the Petroleum Dealers Cooperative Society, the Canoopia Business Association, and we also have the Supermarket Association. Most recently now, the Retailers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, what I want to say, first of all, is that that SME loan was a poorly designed product, was not even consulted with the private sector or even with us, the Confederation, as to how this would help the SMEs. It came out as a product based on penalizing people under a COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I agree with Martin. Compliance is a critical issue that must be adhered to. I agree. But I ask the question too, while people must comply, what was the role of the compliance department in Inland Revenue and in NIB? Were they not supposed to go out to business enterprises and see that they do what is supposed to be done? That there was a lack of enforcement and people continued with what they were doing. I'm not defending it. I'm just calling the situation as it is. What we asked the minister to do is saying, yes, we agree there must be compliance, but these people need assistance as quick as possible. Let us start with ground zero. This is your situation. We will help you on the road to compliance. We will still help you with the facility as you go forward. Stephen, for years in Princeton, Faizabad, Rio Claro, businesses have been getting banking facilities without even full audited accounts because there were other things that they had done and they had had a proven track record with the banks.
Jai, I think you might be going into an area there, opening up an area there. I hope that...
I just want to say one thing, Stephen.
Yes.
Even the bankers were telling their clients, don't take out that loan. Come with us, we'll continue to enhance, give you other facilities and so on under normal arrangements. And that is what took place. Okay. And that is how people are accessing money right now. Yeah. I understand that product has been removed off the roster from banks at this point in time.
Oh, let me go back to Mr. George. Is that the same, situation in Tobago that Jai, has described?
Well, in terms of the loan facility, I mean, I had a look at it on behalf of our members. I examined it extensively. There were, I think, 33 documents of statutory requirements that you needed to prepare, all right? Either 33 or 36, somewhere around there. But the point is, it was extremely document intensive. It was extremely cumbersome, difficult, laborious, time consuming to fill out all the requirements. And then when you looked at what was being offered, you were being offered a loan for $75,000 for which the government said the first 2 years of interest you didn't have to pay back, but thereafter you had to pay back the loan, the principal, the $75,000 plus the balance of the interest. So all you were getting was a 2-year moratorium on the interest. So I think when one looks at that from a business perspective, I am not surprised that there was a very limited uptake, because which businessman, when you do the math, does that even make any sense for? And then on top of that, the hoops you had to jump through, I mean, it was really extremely onerous. And as I said, I went through every document because there were several of our members who were struggling just to even understand what the requirements were, much less to be able to get everything in order and have it ready and to be able to. And then the point is, some of the information you needed and some of the documents you needed were from the very government departments that were either closed or they were on very limited operation. Yes. So you had to make an appointment to get, to be able to go in. And then when you go in, nobody's there. So, I mean, it really turned out to be an exercise in frustration for most persons, particularly that $75,000 loan. And then even from an economic perspective, it did not appear to be something that was economically feasible for most persons, when they looked at it in the round.
All right, and you're listening to and viewing the Citizens Community Forum. I have with me Mr. Martin George, Chair of the Tobago Business Chamber, and also Mr. Jai Lalodar Singh from the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers. And we are discussing the business this evening of the SMEs, looking at where they are, where we need to go, and perhaps charting a way forward, a roadmap, as it were, for the development and resilience and furtherance of the small and medium-sized enterprise sector. Gentlemen, I want us to get a listen. I heard a comment that was made by Dr. Valmiki Arjun, a lecturer in finance at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, and he was talking about the impact of the pandemic on trade, business, and investor confidence in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's just get a listen, and we'll have you comment on that.
We are still finding some serious supply chain problems happening globally, where, for example, if you're involved in manufacturing activities, they're finding it quite difficult to still acquire raw materials on time, their equipment on time, to be able to facilitate their production operations in order to meet whatever orders they may have. And the reason is this: because of that pent-up demand that we're finding globally. For example, in China, their manufacturing activities would have grown by about 38.6% just in the space of 1 month. And the reason for that is because they're getting some very large purchase orders from across the world, particularly from those countries that were able to reopen their economies. But suppliers can only meet a particular percentage.
Of course, we have also been talking about, the impact on when we look at trade and, how Trinidad and Tobago has been faring there as well. I just want to get some quick responses from you both on that particular point. When we look at trade, how have we been faring? And what are some of the obstacles? And we do have maybe about 5 minutes again, gentlemen. Would you believe time is going by so quickly? If I could just have you both respond to that, and maybe we can touch this quickly as well on the ease of doing business. Let me start with you, Mr. Laladar Singh. Okay.
First of all, I do agree with Dr. Arjun. The global supply chains are being compromised. Even freight charges have gone up by 100%, in some cases 150 to 200%. This is going to affect the price. Let me begin with food, and that will bring a crisis here, because if food cannot be obtained by our consumers and our working class people, then the country is in deep trouble. Bringing in other materials that is needed, let's say construction materials, I understand that has also gone up 100% as well, yes, and it's going to be climbing higher. We have to find a way to address the whole issue of the global supply chains, understand what is causing it, and understanding how to deal with it. Now, a friend of mine from the business community sent me a presidential notice from the Office of the President of Guyana that he is also trying to reduce freight, certain rates and customs charges, so that will ease up the global pricing issue for Guyanese businessmen that are confronting these overwhelming challenges. We have overwhelming challenges here already, both of a financial nature, custom charges, customs overtime, demurrage charges, and the whole issue of the inefficiency of the customs and excise itself. I mean, we see the serious customs and excise reform in this country. And again, that takes a whole, Martin can emphasize on that, but that takes a whole special majority in Parliament. And right now, where you have an strained relationship between government and opposition, I don't know how possible it is.
That may not happen anytime soon. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, Stephen.
Let me go quickly over to Mr. George. Mr. George, time is running away with us.
Yes,
you
sure.
can just respond to that in 2 minutes. And if you can as well touch on the ease of doing business. I don't know how much we can. That's right. A whole nother discussion.
Stephen,
but let's see how quickly we can go through that.
Interestingly, one of the fundamental problems in terms of the global supply chain is a shortage of containers. Would you believe that is a fundamental problem for the shippers? Because what has happened is that you have lots of containers which are sitting in warehouses, but because of lack of staff, because of the shutdowns and slowdowns with COVID, they were not unstuffed. So you have containers sitting there with goods. They have not been returned empty, so therefore they can't be used again until they are unstuffed. And that is part of a problem. So can you believe something as basic as that? There's also the question of space on ships in terms of the cargo ships. And it has reached a situation now where persons are being charged a premium in order to get their containers on ships. I know for a fact some importers in Trinidad and Tobago, you have to pay like a surcharge just to get your, so this is on top of all your freight charges, your CIF charges, everything. You have to pay a surcharge just to make sure your containers get on the ship. So it's really a crazy scenario. And then you add to that the fact that they are now demanding for local business persons that they pay in US and they pay upfront in US. Even when the freight lands in Trinidad, they are demanding payments in US. The international shippers are demanding. So all the local fees that you used to pay in TT dollars, they are now demanding US dollars. And this is in a situation where the foreign exchange crisis is fully upon us. So it really is, we're in a whirlwind. And that's why I'm saying, Stephen, we really need some clear guidance and direction from the government in terms of what's the long-term plan. We know we're in a dark place, but we need you to be able to show us the light and show us, well, okay, we're heading in that direction. We don't want to end up like the Israelites wandering for 40 years in the desert and making no progress whatsoever. Okay. We need a Moses to lead us out of this situation.
All right.
I agree with Steve. I'm with Martin.
Yes, gentlemen, I think we have to leave it there at the moment. Time has just, ran away with us, and I will take that which you've said there as your closing remarks because of our, constraint of time. Gentlemen, thank you so much again for, for being with us and on the Citizens Community Forum. I get the sense that we'll have to continue this discussion because there's so much more that we haven't, touched on, we haven't gone into, but I'm sure we'll have another opportunity at another time. Thank you so much again for joining us.
It's indeed a pleasure.
It's indeed a pleasure. Stephen, thank you, Martin and Steve. My apologies for jumping in late, but I'm happy with the discussion. And nice to reconnect with Martin.
Yes, thanks. Yes,
thank you again, gentlemen. Talk with you soon.
Okay.
And you're listening to and viewing the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and we were talking this evening about SMEs, the small and enterprise sector, road ahead for SMEs current and post-pandemic. And with me, my two guests, Mr. Jai Lalodar Singh, business consultant and coordinator of the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers, and of course, Mr. Martin George, chair of the Tobago Business Chamber. I'm Stephen Cummings. This has been the Citizens Community Forum. See you next Wednesday.
It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.
And it was a very intriguing, interesting discussion. Where do we go from here? The cry for Moses to lead the people out of darkness is amazing. How folks know the Bible and the accounts, what the things that happened, and we continue to trust